Hi everybody.
Hello.
Some of you got this. Feel free to just have it in your hand and enjoy it. If you didn't get it or you forgot yours, that's okay. You don't need it. If you have one, share it with someone beside you. It's just a reference. Maybe it'll make sense at the end. I want to start by saying that nobody gets HIV alone, so no one should have to deal with HIV alone. This piece is dedicated to everyone who already knows this and anyone who can understand this. So of course this piece is dedicated to everyone in this room. In the photo, on the right-hand side, a sister's hand cradles the top of her niece's head, covering one ear and drawing a shoulder close. The two look forward, eyelids soft. The niece's left hand is on the hospital bed railing where her uncle, David Kerr, lays, his eyes open, looking out, above and beyond. David's father swaddles his son's head and elbow with his hand, meaty, his eyes closed, nose gentle against his son's forehead. Both David and his father wear watches. Above them, a painted hand beckons forward, the rest of the body cut off by a photographer's eye. To the left, another hand, body unseen, holds David's wrist. The image, David Kirby on his deathbed, Ohio, 1990, was taken by Teresa Frere the spring that David died of AIDS-related complications. Months after, the picture was published in Life magazine. 2 years later, it was used for what became an infamous Benetton clothing ad. The photograph provides an important and familiar narrative. A frail young man dying needlessly before his time. And in that, the picture also contains details and absences that speaks to stories and dynamics of the ongoing AIDS crisis, largely untold, teetering on the precipice of being lost. The hand on David's wrist belongs to Peta, who, the day the photo was taken, invited Teresa, a photography student at the time doing a project on AIDS, to follow, as Peta did the rounds as a caregiver at the hospice. Teresa stayed in the hallway as Peta went in to check on David, a friend, who was near his final days. Teresa had met David once before, and he had given her permission to be photographed. As Peta visited with David, David's mother invited Teresa into the room, asking her to take photos of what could be their last moments all together. On Teresa's contact sheets from that day, which you can see online, Peta's whole body can be seen, tall, with long hair pulled back, wearing a black leather jacket, a comb peeking out of a back pocket of light blue jeans. In the limited information available about Peta, we meet a caregiver from the Pine Ridge Indian Reserve, living with HIV, who, as Teresa recalls, rode the line between genders. After David died, the Kirbys made a commitment to care for Peta as death approached, and Teresa continued to photograph. In one image, we find Peta in a wheelchair looking down, hair in braids, David's parents standing behind, the sheen of Peta's silky robe, midnight, against the Kirbys' matte, white cotton stomachs. Recently, a short web documentary was made about David Kirby on his deathbed, joining the ever-growing body of work looking back at HIV history. I call this body the AIDS Crisis Revisitation. Starting after a period of AIDS-related silence emerging after the release of life-saving medication in 1996, the AIDS Crisis Revisitation begins in 2008 with a noticeable increase in the creation, dissemination, and discussion of culture concerned with the early response to HIV. The revisitation includes, but is not limited to, the films How to Survive a Plague, Dallas Buyers Club, the exhibitions Art AIDS America, One Day This Kid Will Grow Larger, Tim Murphy's novel Christadora, Alyssa Abbott's memoir Fairyland, Tiona McLeod's artwork for Essex Hemphill, and the plays 30-something written by Dan Fishback, and Here We Should Stand, Like This, written by Harrison Rivers. Overall, the revisitation has been positive, carving out a space for healing, hearing, and reunion. And yet, as myself and others have noticed, there is a narrowness within the revisitation. With a few exceptions, which I was sure to name, within the revisitation, there is an overall absence of people of color, of women, of black people, of trans people, of people in rural America, people who inject drugs, who have sex, who do sex work, who live in poverty, and people who live in the intersections of all these ways of being alive. I see the work coming out of the AIDS crisis revisitation and I think, where are all the people? Why am I only seeing different versions of me? It's not that the story of white gay men in the face of the plague does not matter, it does. It's just that it's not the only story. And in a patriarchal culture of white supremacy, it gets treated as the beginning and the end of the story. I avoided watching the short film on the David Kirby photo. As someone working at the intersection of art, AIDS, and activism for over 15 years, I too, as a white, gay, HIV-negative, middle-class, cis man, failed to acknowledge PETA. And I couldn't bear the thought of the film doing the same. But I was provoked into watching the film this week, inspired to write this essay of sorts by the faculty panel comments on the absence and presence of AIDS culture. So, sitting one night at the flat white bar of a desk in our rooms, I watched the film. Early on, PETA appears through the photos. I gasped. Would I hear someone other than me, or my friend who jump-started my research, say PETA out loud? No. PETA is never named, referred to only as a caregiver, and then only once in passing. Black feminist ethicist Dr. Tracy West tells us that our ethics form where the story begins, and our ethics are revealed in our actions. When you look at the work coming out of the AIDS crisis revisitation, the stories often begin mirroring the focus with photos like the one of David Kirby, a white gay man, to be pitied, to be feared. And so, isn't Dr. West so painfully right? The bulk of our actions in response to HIV have been, and still are, focused on white gay men, or making a big production of it when they're not. So what would it mean if we pulled the camera back and started the story with that which has been obscured, cut off, neglected? What would it mean if we told the story of HIV through PETA, through people whose land has been stolen, through people whose gender the culture refuses to see? What if we told the story of AIDS through the visible hand of friendship? I give you this zine tonight because first and foremost, HIV is a material reality, which lives in some people's bodies and not in others. The reasons for this disparity, intimate and systemic in scale. I wanted you, if you think that HIV is not present in your life, to hold something of the virus in your hand. I give you this zine tonight because AIDS is a cultural phenomenon, which is shaped by us. AIDS is a rolling cultural inheritance, a spectacle that looms overhead, shaping prose, poetry, and desire. I give you this zine tonight as a gift, a prompt. Please accept the transmission and replicate the love without fear. Say PETA's name, let it linger on our lips. Thank you.